Some serial killers hide behind a mask of normalcy. For John Wayne Gacy, that mask was literal. A beloved member of his community, a businessman, and, most disturbingly, a man who entertained children at parties dressed as a clown. But beneath that painted smile lurked one of the most terrifying murderers in American history. In today's episode of The Murderer's Mindset, we delve into the mind of the killer clown, John Wayne Gacy, who murdered 33 young men and boys in the 1970s. How did he manage to live a double life, fooling everyone around him while carrying out unspeakable horrors? Let's find out. To understand John Wayne Gacy, we have to start with his early life. Born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Gacy grew up in a working-class family, the second of 3 children. He had a difficult relationship with his father, John Stanley Gacy, who was an alcoholic and often took out his frustrations on young John. His father belittled him, calling him dumb and sissy, and even physically abused him. These experiences scarred Gacy deeply, contributing to his lifelong struggle with self-worth and masculinity. Gacy also suffered from health problems, including a heart condition, which limited his physical abilities. His father viewed this as yet another weakness. The emotional and physical abuse, combined with Gacy's feelings of inadequacy, would be factors in the creation of his dark, hidden persona later in life. These unresolved issues would grow, eventually leading him down a path of destruction. Despite his troubled childhood, Gacy attempted to build a respectable life. In 1964, he moved to Springfield, Illinois, where he met and married Marlyn Myers. Through her father, Gacy became the manager of 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises, earning a good living. He appeared to have the perfect suburban life, a wife, 2 children, and a stable job. On the surface, Gacy was a successful, outgoing, and popular man. He was active in local politics, even becoming the vice president of a local Jaycees chapter, a civic organization that focused on leadership and community service. But behind this outward success, Gacy's dark desires began to surface. In 1968, Gacy was arrested for the first time after sexually assaulting a teenage boy, a charge he denied. Gacy lured the boy with promises of pornography and forced him into performing sexual acts. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for sodomy, but served only 18 months. However, this was just the beginning. After his release, he returned to Chicago, remarried, and restarted his business ventures, once again masking his true nature. It was during the 1970s that John Wayne Gacy began to cultivate his sinister alter ego, Pogo the Clown. He joined a local Jolly Joker clown club, performing at children's parties, hospitals, and charity events. It was the perfect disguise. Who would ever suspect a clown? This persona allowed him to blend into the community, gaining trust and access to vulnerable victims. Gacy used his charm and status to lure young men to his home under various pretenses, offering them work, alcohol, or drugs. But once inside, the atmosphere changed. Gacy would often perform what he called his handcuff trick, convincing his victims to allow themselves to be restrained. From there, he would brutalize and murder them, often strangling them with a rope, a method he referred to as his rope trick. His victims were typically young boys and men, ranging from ages 14 to 21, many of whom were runaways or workers who depended on Gacy for employment. Their disappearances went unnoticed for years, largely because they were from marginalized groups. Gacy exploited this, knowing that police wouldn't prioritize their cases. The true horror of Gacy's crimes lies in what he did after murdering his victims. He buried 26 of them in the crawlspace beneath his home at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue, covering their bodies in quicklime to accelerate decomposition. The crawl space became a macabre graveyard, filled with bodies packed tightly together, their remains stacked like a house of horrors. Gacy continued his killing spree unchecked for 6 years, burying the majority of his victims in the crawl space, while others were dumped in nearby rivers. His ability to maintain a public life while hiding the horrors beneath his home is one of the most chilling aspects of his story. Gacy's downfall began in December 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Piest went missing after a meeting with Gacy about a potential job. Unlike many of his previous victims, Piest's disappearance drew immediate attention due to his family's persistence and the fact that Piest was a well-liked, middle-class boy. This led police to investigate Gacy further, eventually obtaining a search warrant for his home. When officers entered the crawl space, the overwhelming stench of decaying bodies hit them. What they found shocked even the most seasoned investigators: 29 bodies buried in various stages of decomposition. Gacy confessed to the murders, admitting he had killed 33 young men, though only 29 were found in his house. Gacy's trial in 1980 became one of the most notorious in U.S. history. His defense attorneys attempted to plead insanity, claiming that Gacy had multiple personalities and couldn't be held responsible for his actions. Psychiatrists testified that he exhibited traits of borderline schizophrenia, though others argued he was fully aware of his crimes and relished the power. The prosecution, on the other hand, painted a picture of Gacy as a cold, calculating killer who knew exactly what he was doing. His victims were dehumanized, reduced to objects for his sadistic pleasure. The jury took less than 2 hours to find him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to death. So what drove John Wayne Gacy to commit these heinous acts? Experts believe Gacy's early life played a major role in shaping his violent tendencies. His need for power and control stemmed from years of feeling inadequate and powerless. His clown persona, Pogo, was a way to mask his true identity, allowing him to compartmentalize his violent urges while maintaining a facade of normalcy. Psychiatrists who examined Gacy noted his narcissism, lack of empathy, and inability to feel guilt. He showed no remorse for his victims, often referring to them as mere objects. His ability to dissociate from his crimes is what made him so dangerous. He was a master manipulator, able to convince others he was harmless while carrying out unspeakable acts. In 1980, Gacy went to trial for the murder of 33 boys and young men. His defense team attempted to argue that Gacy was insane, that he had multiple personalities and was not in control of his actions. They even claimed that his alter ego, Jack, committed the murders. However, the overwhelming evidence, including Gacy's own admissions, made it clear that this was not the case. Gacy was convicted on all counts and sentenced to death. While awaiting execution, Gacy showed no remorse, often painting self-portraits of himself as Pogo the Clown, a final chilling reminder of his ability to compartmentalize his monstrous acts. On May 10, 1994, after 14 years on death row, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. Gacy's ability to present himself as a normal, upstanding citizen while carrying out such heinous crimes has fascinated psychologists for decades. Diagnosed as a psychopath, Gacy showed no empathy for his victims. He saw them as disposable objects, tools for his gratification. His narcissism, need for control, and lack of remorse fit the classic profile of a serial killer. Perhaps what makes Gacy one of the most terrifying killers in history is the ease with which he blended into society. He was a man who could smile and joke with neighbors, even perform as a clown at children's parties, while leading a life of unspeakable horror behind closed doors. It is this duality, the ability to live a double life so effortlessly, that makes John Wayne Gacy's story so chilling. John Wayne Gacy's case is one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. A man who hid his monstrous tendencies behind a mask of charm and community involvement, Gacy reminds us how little we may know about the people we think we trust. His victims, 33 young men and boys, will never be forgotten. And while Gacy's execution brought an end to his reign of terror, the psychological scars he left behind still haunt the families of his victims and the community. To this day, we're left wondering, what drives someone like Gacy to commit such atrocities? Could it have been stopped, or were the warning signs buried too deep beneath the surface? Thank you for joining us in this episode of The Murderer's Mindset. If you're fascinated by true crime and the dark psychology behind some of the world's most notorious killers, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into the minds of history's most terrifying murderers every week, and you won't want to miss our upcoming episodes. Tap the notification bell to stay updated, and if you found this episode chilling, give it a like and share it with others who are intrigued by the darkest corners of the human mind.